You're 34 years old. You've got a decent job. You're making more money than you've ever made in your life. And somehow, you still feel broke. Not can't pay rent broke, but that quiet nagging kind of broke where every month the money just disappears. You look at your bank account and think, where did it all go? You know you're not a kid anymore. You know you're supposed to have figured it out by now. But when you actually look at the numbers, the real numbers, something doesn't add up. Here's the thing, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not behind in the way you think you are, but you are running out of time to fix a few very specific things. Because your 30s are not just another decade. They are, mathematically, the single most important 10-year window of your entire financial life. Not your 20s, not your 40s, your 30s. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why and exactly what milestones you need to hit before this decade slips away from you. If you're someone who feels like you make good money, but somehow never seem to get ahead, like the numbers in your bank account just don't match the effort you're putting in, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because look, your 30s hit different. Your 20s were about surviving, student loans, entry-level jobs, figuring out who you are. But your 30s, this is when the game actually starts. This is when compounding either starts working for you or starts quietly working against you. Let's get into it. Here's a belief almost everyone in their 30s carries around without even realizing it. I'll get serious about money later, once I make more. I need you to hear this. That belief is financially killing you in slow motion. Here's why. Money isn't just about how much you earn, it's about how much time your money has to grow. And in your 30s, you have something you will never, ever get back once this decade ends. 2 to 3 full decades of compounding runway before retirement. Let me show you the math, because this is where it gets really interesting. Say you're 30 years old and you start investing $500 a month into an index fund, averaging a historical 8% annual return. By the time you're 65, that account is worth roughly $930,000. Now say you wait until you're 40 to start. Same $500 a month, same 8% return. By 65, that account is worth about $410,000. Same amount of money invested every single month, same rate of return. But waiting just 10 years cost you over $500,000. That's not a rounding error. That's $500,000 gone because of a single decade of delay. This is the silent wealth killer nobody talks about. It's not a bad investment. It's not a market crash. It's just time, quietly leaving the room without you noticing. Now you might be thinking, okay, Josh, but I don't have $500 a month lying around. And that's fair. We'll get to exactly how to find that money later in this video. But first, I want you to understand why your 30s specifically are the hinge point of your entire financial life. According to Federal Reserve survey data on household finances, the median net worth for households under 35 cites at roughly $39,000. For households aged 35 to 44, that number jumps to around $135,000. That's not a small gap. That's more than a 3x increase. Why? Because your 30s are when three things converge at once. First, your income typically peaks in growth rate. Most people see their biggest percentage jumps in salary between ages 28 and 38 as they move from entry level to management or from generalist to specialist. Second, this is when lifestyle creep becomes the most dangerous. You're making more money, so subconsciously you start spending like you're supposed to. Nicer apartment, nicer car, more dinners out. And here's what most people don't realize. Lifestyle creep isn't really about material weakness. It's about social signaling. Psychologically, humans are wired to display status increases to their peer group as fast as their income allows. Every raise gets mentally pre-spent before it even hits your account. Third, this is the decade where major financial decisions get locked in. Marriage, kids, mortgages. Once you sign a 30-year mortgage or commit to a certain lifestyle, you're not just making a decision for this year. You're making a decision that echoes for the next 3 decades. So your 30s aren't just another decade of adulting, they're the decade where your financial trajectory gets set in stone. That's why the milestones matter so much. Here's the first milestone that most financial planners agree on, even if the exact ratio varies. By age 30, you want roughly 1 year's salary saved for retirement. By age 35, that number should be closer to 2 times your salary. And by 40, it should be around 3 times your annual income. Let's put real numbers on this. Say you make $65,000 a year, right around the median income for someone in their early 30s. By 35, you'd want roughly $130,000 saved across retirement accounts. By 40, roughly $195,000. Now, here's the objection I know you're thinking. There's no way I'm anywhere close to that. Here's the thing, most people aren't. And that's actually the point of showing you this milestone. It's not there to make you feel bad. It's there so you know exactly where the bar is so you can start closing the gap on purpose instead of drifting toward it by accident. Here's what changes in your 30s that didn't matter as much in your 20s. Your emergency fund needs to grow with your responsibilities, not just your income. In your 20s, a $1,000 emergency fund might have been fine. You had fewer dependents, lower rent, more flexibility to move back in with family if things went sideways. In your 30s, that same $1,000 buffer is dangerously thin. Here's the math. If your monthly expenses are $4,000, which is realistic once you factor in rent or a mortgage, a car payment, groceries, insurance, you want between 3 and 6 months of expenses saved. That's $12,000 to $24,000 sitting in a high yield savings account, completely untouched, earning around 4 to 5% right now, while doing absolutely nothing else but existing as your safety net. Now, you might be thinking, that feels like a lot of money to just let sit there doing nothing. And look, I get the instinct. You want that money working, growing, invested. But here's the psychological piece most people miss. An emergency fund isn't an investment, it's insurance. Its entire job is to be boring, liquid, and available the moment your car breaks down or you lose your job. The moment you invest your emergency fund in the stock market, you've turned insurance into a gamble, and that's exactly the kind of decision that wrecks people during recessions. This one's not glamorous, but it might be the single highest return move available to you in your 30s. If you're carrying credit card debt at a 22 to 25% interest rate, which is the current national average, paying that off is mathematically better than almost any investment you could make. Here's why. There is no reliable investment on earth that guarantees you a 22% annual return. But paying off a credit card at 22% interest gives you a guaranteed 22% return every single time with zero market risk. Let's use real numbers. Say you're carrying $8,000 in credit card debt at 23% interest, making minimum payments of around $200 a month. At that rate, it would take you over 6 years to pay off, and you'd pay more than $7,000 in interest alone, almost doubling what you originally borrowed. This is where the psychology becomes just as important as the math. Most people don't stay in debt because they're bad with money. They stay in debt because of what's called the minimum payment trap. Psychologically, seeing a manageable minimum payment creates a false sense of control, even while the balance barely moves. Your brain registers, I'm handling this even when the math says otherwise. The actionable fix. Use either the debt avalanche method, paying off your highest interest rate debt first, or the debt snowball method, paying off your smallest balance first for a psychological win. The avalanche saves you more money mathematically. The snowball keeps you motivated. Pick whichever one you'll actually stick with, because consistency beats optimization every time. Here's a stat that should honestly make you a little angry. Studies on 401k participation have found that a significant portion of employees don't contribute enough to capture their full employer match, meaning they're leaving free money on the table every single paycheck. Let's say your employer matches 100% of your contributions up to 4% of your salary, and you make $70,000 a year. If you're only contributing 2%, you're leaving $1,400 a year in free money on the table. Over a 10-year stretch in your 30s, assuming that money would have grown at a modest 7% return, that's not just $14,000 you missed out on, it's closer to $20,000 once you factor in compounding. Here's what most people don't realize about this one. Employer match isn't a bonus, it's part of your actual compensation. Not claiming it is functionally identical to your employer handing you a check and you tearing it up in front of them. Now, this is a controversial one, and I want to challenge a belief a lot of people hold, that buying a home in your 30s is automatically the responsible adult decision. Here's the truth. Buying a home only makes financial sense if you're staying put for at least 5 to 7 years. Why? Because closing costs, realtor fees, and the upfront cost of moving typically eat up 8 to 10% of the home's value. If you sell in year 2 or 3, you can actually lose money even if the home's value went up. Let's run the numbers on a $350,000 home. If you put 10% down, that's $35,000 upfront, plus another $10,000 to $15,000 in closing costs. If you sell that home just 2 years later, even after modest appreciation, you could still walk away with less money than you put in once you subtract selling costs. So here's the actionable milestone. By your mid-30s, you should have a clear, honest answer to one question. Am I staying in this city for the next 5+ years? If yes, home ownership can absolutely be a wealth building tool. If you're not sure, Renting isn't throwing money away, it's buying flexibility, and flexibility has real financial value that most people never calculate. Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is the milestone most people in their 30s completely skip. Once you're contributing enough to get your full employer match and you've built your emergency fund, the next move is opening a Roth IRA or increasing contributions to a taxable brokerage account. Here's why this matters specifically in your 30s. A Roth IRA lets your investments grow completely tax free, and because you're likely decades away from retirement, you have the maximum possible runway for that tax free growth to compound. Let's do the math one more time, because numbers stick better than advice. If you max out a Roth IRA at $7,000 a year starting at 30, and you do that consistently until 65, averaging an 8% annual return, you'd end up with just over $1.3 million completely tax free. Compare that to putting the same money in a regular taxable account where you'd owe capital gains taxes on the growth, and you're looking at a difference of well over $200,000 by retirement. Here's the one milestone that isn't about a dollar figure at all. It's about identity. Somewhere in your 30s, you need to make a psychological shift from thinking of yourself as someone who deals with money when it comes up to someone who actively manages money as a skill like fitness or nutrition. This is the single biggest difference between people who build wealth in their 30s and people who look up at 40, wondering where the last decade went. Here's the analogy that makes this click. Nobody accidentally gets in great physical shape. It requires intention, tracking, and consistent small decisions repeated over time. Money is exactly the same. Nobody accidentally becomes financially secure. It's not a personality trait some people are born with. It's a system applied consistently for years. Let's bring this all together into something you can actually act on this week. 1. Build a 3 to 6 month emergency fund in a high yield savings account. 2. Eliminate any high interest debt above 15 to 20% using the avalanche or snowball method. 3. Contribute at least enough to your 401k to capture your full employer match. That's non negotiable, free money. 4. Open and fund a Roth IRA if you qualify, prioritizing tax free growth while you have decades of runway left. 5. Get honest about homeownership. Don't buy because you feel like you're supposed to. Buy because the math and your timeline actually make sense. 6. Track your net worth every single quarter. Not your income, not your salary, your net worth, assets minus liabilities. This is the only number that actually tells you if you're moving forward or standing still. Look, your 30s can feel like this pressure cooker decade where everyone around you seems to have it figured out. Buying homes, getting promoted, posting vacations, while you're quietly wondering if you're behind. Here's the truth. You're not behind. You're early. Every single milestone in this video is still 100% achievable from exactly where you're sitting right now. The only thing that actually runs out is time you don't use intentionally. So don't let this decade be the one you look back on and wish you'd taken seriously. Pick one milestone from this video, just one, and go start it today. If this video helped you see your finances a little more clearly, make sure to subscribe, drop a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments which milestone you're starting with first. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next video.